I had my holiday weekend already. I went out to Big Mountains, Purple Majesty, and climbed. And if you had more fun than me, you probably broke a few laws. So hopefully no one had more fun than me. If you haven't been here in a while, or if this is your first time you've ever been here, this is how we have been doing things for the last year. Is we're taking one sort of theme, and we put a whole bunch of sermons together on that theme in a series. And you can make connections that way between God and your life and this story and that story. And hopefully that brings you a little closer to direction and meaning when we jam that all together. Last week we started our series for the summer based on questions that people in this congregation had a few months ago. We wrote them down in worship on the little green cards, handed them forward. And there were questions about heaven and questions about what to do in your life, questions about spirit and purpose. They weren't my questions. They weren't questions that some big church leader somewhere sent down to us. They weren't questions that the session thought, you really should ask those questions if you're going to be part of this church. They were your questions that you wrote down. And so someone asked, why can't I believe? And someone else asked, does anyone ever get a certainty that overrides doubt? That's what we looked at last week. 2 people wrote those questions. Probably 72 of you have had those questions somewhere in your life. And probably many of you in this room right now have that question just deep in your soul. And it's hard to answer. Does God exist? Should I believe in God? What's the evidence either way? Many of us go through periods of serious doubt through our whole lives. Some of you call that your 20s. Some of you call that your whole life. And that's okay because we have questions. We wonder. We challenge the ideas that we hear about God. Hopefully we wrestle with the ideas that we have about God. And for many of us, really the answers and certainty seem a long way away. That's kind of healthy. That's kind of part of the journey, at least as I understand the Bible and as I understand God. Because there's other thoughts on this, but as I understand how people develop a deeper trust in God, there's a value in curiosity and a value in mystery, and there can even be comfort when we doubt and we share our doubts together. It's almost as though God is confident enough, even content, to just give us questions, wherever that might take us. And am I alone on this, or are there some amens out there for God being perfectly comfortable with questions? Amen. Yeah. So for anyone who asks from last week's question, why can't I believe? My best answer is because you're normal. Why can't I believe? Well, because you care enough to think about the things that people told you about God that don't always add up. Why can't I believe? Because you're on a journey and it takes some time to stop and read the map. Why can't I believe? Well, because you and God are going to take the next steps to work that out. And you're going to run into someone later who has that question, and you can be a guidepost for them. So is there a God? I think so. Whew, it's a good thing that pastor. It's a good thing he believes in God. Some of you are there with me. And because you're there with me, you have plenty of questions about this God in whom you trust. Others of you, is there a God? Maybe. If so, I've got some questions about her, or him, or it, or that. And so wherever you are with God, belief or unbelief or that middle ground that so many of us live in, chances are the very next question for you at some point in your life, this concern that all of us have deep in our guts. The Greek word is splachna, which is the most fun word in the whole Bible. Say it with me. Splachna. Yeah, deep in your guts, you have this question, and that is, why do we have pain and suffering in the world? That's what someone wrote on their green card. Why is there bad stuff in the world? If God exists, then what do we do with all the evil? What do we do with the hurt? Or some of you, I believe in God, but there's a lot of explaining to do. We talk about God is loving, God is powerful, God is just, God is all these things. So why do we have to put up with cancer and AIDS? And why are there floods? And why is my mom depressed? And why is it so possible, so easy for us to hurt each other so badly? Why are there mosquitoes? Why, God, did you send us Justin Bieber? Other than kind of that one, these are really normal, healthy questions. But sometimes it gets twisted a little bit. Sometimes that question gets skewed. And sometimes people say, you'll hear this, you'll say it this way, Why do good things happen to... I tricked you. How about this way? Why do bad things happen to... Don't worry, the other one's a segue for later. We'll do that little foreshadowing thing. When I hear it that way, that good people thing, it's like fingers on God's chalkboard to my ears. And honestly, if that book, titled that, if that book has helped you in your life, or if that language brings you closer to God in some way, awesome. For the next few minutes, do a crossword puzzle. Because for me, when I hear that added little phrase, two good people, the question goes from this powerful and real and normal and healthy question to one of these other just kind of quasi-Christian sayings that just drive me crazy. When were you saved? Have you ever found Jesus? Dear Father God. Pretty much anything Oprah said. Just put it in that category. And I know this makes me sound like a horrible person, but I never promised to be nice. But when I hear that kind of language about good people, what I really hear behind that are some assumptions and beliefs about God and the world that are just kind of hiding there. And I understand what people are feeling, and I'm on board with this sort of question, but what I hear behind all this is, behind that good person's bit is, life's supposed to be fair. And I hear, I'm a good enough person that I don't deserve this. And I hate that sometimes I hear, maybe those people do deserve it. It's not what you mean when you phrase the question that way, so don't email me about that or Justin Bieber. But however you ask the question, whether it's no people in the phrase or good people in the phrase, can we at least agree that God never promised that life would be easier if you'd behave better? Because God gave some covenants. We understand that in the Bible. God gave some covenants. God never offered that deal. And even if God did offer that deal, do you really think you could follow up with all the red tape? And when you look a little farther to Jesus, if Jesus showed us anything, isn't it that goodness as a better way is more painful? And of course, we get it. There are consequences in the world. There is pain in the world for our behavior. And sometimes those consequences match up really nice with the things we do. But whose idea was it that those things ever should line up? Because that's nothing God ever said, and that's nothing that Jesus ever lived. So the better question, why do bad things happen? Question mark. Why is there evil and suffering in the world? But sometimes, someone gets that. That's the good question. There's another way to twist it. Another way I hear it twisted all the time. Why does God make bad things happen? Well, why does God cause this evil in my life? And again, if that's where you're at with God, I hope that somehow that's pointing you to a more peaceful kind of spirituality. But when I hear those words kind of inserted in there, I hear something behind that language, and it's the idea that God is choosing to do this to me, or choosing to do this to them. And then you start to think, well, why would God pick on me? What's God's reasons? What did I do for God to be against me? I must have done something to deserve this punishment. And when you get to there, if you're really lucky with that sort of language, you might get to the point where you think that Jesus saves you from God. Maybe, if you're lucky. But usually, when you go down that road, with that baggage and with that guilt, whatever you think about God being loving and just and graceful and merciful, what usually happens is you start to think of God as being a vengeful jerk. And who wants to trust that kind of God? The little words matter. And when so many people live and they grow up with this subtle idea that God is out to get them, when they take on this assumption that God is causing pain, it's a short walk to think that God just is evil. So in my humble opinion, which in this little parenthetical remark, not so humble, when it comes to trying to keep you away from kind of mean thoughts about God, I'm just going to put it out there. It's not that humble. But right next to this question of whether there's a God to believe in, someone wrote it exactly the right way. Why do we have pain and suffering? Just that's the question. So the answer, why? Lots of different answers. They tend to fall into two kinds of ways to answer the question. On one hand, there's an intellectual response. This is quite an interesting question. How is it that the world is shaped to include bad stuff? And how is it that the people are shaped to be able to feel bad stuff? And how is it that those two things kind of match up? The world could have been created. God could have made the world without evil, or could have made us where we didn't have those bad feelings. Or, here's a crazy thought, we could have had a world where those things just didn't match up. People, I don't even know, in Colorado, do you have a thing called the daddy long legs?
Yes.
You do? Okay. Not really, are they a spider? I don't think they're even a spider. They are? Long, skinny legs, little bitty body. And there was this, it's not an urban legend, but there was this like middle of nowhere legend when I grew up that daddy long legs were super poisonous. Like that was a legend, is they were super poisonous. But their mouths weren't big enough to bite you. So you were safe, right? And the world could be like that, couldn't it? Couldn't God have set the world up so that it's got a lot of evil, but that somehow its fangs just can't get into us? Just an intellectual question. I don't know. Weird stuff like that you should really save for your deck with friends at home at night and not say it in public like this. But the other way to answer, or to try to answer that question, why is there suffering in the world? We do ask that question, and we help people wrestle with the same question from a very emotional place. The question isn't, why is there suffering in the world? The question is, why is there pain now in me, in my life, in her life, in his life, in the person I love? Why do they suffer? That question means something deep when you're in the thick of it, and when you're working through the darkness. Even when you reflect on those times back in your life. You can ask the question with dispassionate curiosity. But when you're at the hospital with someone who's in trouble, and you're holding their hand and spending time with them and listening to their pain, what is God's role in that? Where is God in that situation? How are we supposed to respond? By trusting a God that lets that happen here, now, to them? Some of you answer this with, well, God has to let there be some pain in the world so that there can be some goodness. Yeah, maybe. I kind of hear that. There might be something true about that, but it doesn't really touch me here. It might make some sense, but it doesn't really touch me here, especially in those times when I can't even imagine. I'm in such despair, I can't imagine goodness. It doesn't line up for me. Others might say, well, people choose their own evil. God doesn't get involved in free will. Also, probably true, but that's pretty unsatisfying to me. When you think of hurricanes, when you think of drunk drivers that run into you, I make plenty of mistakes in my life, but that thing that happened to me, that wasn't my fault. So don't tell me it's okay because some other jerk did that, or because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's not satisfying. So some people say, we're looking at the question all wrong. We shouldn't think that our suffering is all that bad, because really God has designed a pretty awesome world where we have the least amount of pain and suffering possible. It's as though the world is this big Sudoku puzzle, and like God puts a little goodness over here, so there's got to be some suffering over here, and that means that this person's life is pretty good, but that means like Africa, oh well, they're gonna get a different number over there. And frankly, there's probably something true about that, logically or theologically. In my head, I can sort of sympathize with that possibility, but it just doesn't touch my heart. It might help your conception of God, but it doesn't inspire my prayer. Others point out, bad things happen, and then people respond so well. So it's this opportunity for us to be great to each other. So look at 9/11. Brought out the best in everybody. Again, probably true. Is that why we have evil? Bring out the best in everybody? I'm not sure it's worth the trade-off. So someone on their green card, they asked it this way. They said, well, why is there suffering? And then they wrote on the side, I've never been a big fan of the phrase, to teach us a lesson. It just doesn't fit you. And I agree. It seems like a weasel of a God that has to use suffering to teach us some kind of lesson. There are so many other answers people give, and you might have some more of them. In 36 years, I haven't found one that's really answered it fully for me. The question still kind of lingers there. I haven't found an answer where when I'm standing at a funeral, I can just say, well, this is why. And everyone says, yeah, that makes sense. The question lingers. The question stays in our hearts. So what are we supposed to do when the question lingers? 2 ideas. First of all, someone else in the church, they didn't write it down, but I wrote it down when they said it. Someone in the church has been going through a lot lately. Their family we've been praying for. She's been suffering. She's seen too much. She's had to be the glue for other people who don't know why all this has happened. Mary Lou's been watching her mother die, and she's been helping her dad through that process. A couple times in this last few months, she said things that I just couldn't help but just write down and wait for just the right sermon for it. And this is the one where I had to say it. She just said one day, I'm sad, I'm tired, I'm broken. I kind of held on to that because later she said, when she deals with these things, she and Dan, sometimes they'll sit at the table and they'll say, God, what are we supposed to learn through all of this? And do you see that difference between the last possible answer and how Mary Lou said it? Why is there pain? Someone might say, so that God can teach us something. Mary Lou said, you know what? There is pain in my life. What can I learn from it? That's a faithful perspective. It doesn't answer the question, but it turns that question upside down. If we know anything about Jesus, what does he do with questions? Turns them upside down. Why is there suffering? I don't know. But what can we do to help your suffering? Why am I in pain? I don't know. But we can do this together. Why is the world so messed up? I don't know. But you can help me redeem it. There's one other way that I've heard really well that turns the question upside down. The foreshadowing you heard earlier. I have this friend, Eric. Eric's about 20 years old now, and in high school he used to really geek out on Bible translations. He wondered which one was, right for him or how he could go to college with the best translation. And before he went to college, he took a year off between high school to go to New Orleans to help serve, to build houses for people who lost their houses in Katrina. Since then, he's served as an intern for youth groups in a couple churches. He's studying so he can learn how to fight poverty and all around the world. When you think, why do bad things happen to good people? He's the good people. And the bad things in his life, he's been through them. He's been through some stuff. His grandparents were in constant decline. Alzheimer's just wrecking them, wrecking the family. Many of you know the story all too well. His mom once told me on the phone, she was going down, I think Grandma had to be moved from one level of care to a stronger level of care, and that meant Grandpa had to figure out how to kind of live sort of on his own, and there were questions and confusions, and it was so hard. And Eric's mom was just so worn out through all this, driving down. And I talked to her on the phone, and I said, how are you dealing with this? And she said, well, I got a box of wine. The next Sunday, she wanted to clarify. She was so concerned, she wanted to clarify. Not like a spigot box of wine. I had 12 bottles. That's my kind of lady right there. Eric and his family had so many good reasons to question and complain and doubt. A year later, his brother, 24 years old, just a rock star of a human being, just died. No way to expect it to happen. Just went to sleep one night, didn't wake up. So one day he comes into my office, and he could have been coming in. I would have expected him to come in to chat about all this stuff. His faith had taken a hit. He was kind of taking it brick by brick and trying to rebuild it, kind of like he did with the homes in Katrina. But instead, he turned that most natural and deep question completely upside down, and he asked me, Hansen, why do good things happen to me? Why is my life blessed? He said, why am I blessed? I don't know, young man. But I look forward to the time when I can have that kind of wisdom to ask that kind of question. I pray that I can look at the world like that more often. Why is there beauty in the world? I don't know. Anyone want to enjoy it together? Why are we able to love each other? Why is the world created with love? And how are we created that we can feel love? And how is it that the world put those together that we can be the type of creatures that love? I don't know. But can we do that more often? Why is it that in a world where there is so much pain, someone is always there to point toward a glimmer of hope. I don't know, but I'm willing to follow them, and I hope that we can be that glimmer of hope for someone else. Amen.